I hadn't been back to my parents' house in 7 months. The neighborhood looked the same: manicured lawns, perfect wreaths, string lights that blinked in rhythm like they were auditioning for a Lexus commercial. But something in my chest tightened the closer I got. Nostalgia? No, I think it was recognition, the kind that reminds you you're not returning home. You're returning to a scene. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed there were more cars than usual. A family gathering. Of course. I stepped out, heels crunching softly against the stone path. The front door opened before I could ring the bell. "There she is," my mother Evelyn called out with a grin that didn't quite touch her eyes. "We thought you'd gotten lost." "Traffic," I lied easily. Inside, the house smelled like rosemary, cinnamon, and something curated, probably intentional. My brother Melissa waved at me from across the room. Yes, Melissa, my parents' precious son with a name meant for glamour. He was wearing a cashmere sweater I bought him 3 Christmases ago. He never said thank you. "Maureen," he called, "you made it." "I said I would, didn't I?" He grinned and turned back to a group of family friends who were fawning over something on his phone. Evelyn passed me a glass of wine without asking what I wanted. Chardonnay. Always Chardonnay. She used to say it fit my vibe, whatever that meant. The living room had been rearranged. More neutral tones, more plants, less warmth. My name floated briefly in conversations, always in passive voice. "Maureen works in law now, right?" "She lives in Seattle?" "Oh, that's ambitious." No one asked about my firm. No one asked about my latest case. They nodded like they were checking a box. Acknowledge Maureen. Move on. Dinner was served at 6. A long mahogany table, 10 seats filled with curated guests, polished silverware, and forced laughter. My place card was slightly off-center. Subtle, but noticeable. Midway through the roast, my father, Barbara, cleared his throat. He always did that before making an announcement. The room fell quiet. "I just want to take a moment to recognize a milestone," he began, resting a hand on Melissa's shoulder. "Our family is entering a new chapter, and to honor that, we've made an investment. For the future." I froze. Evelyn smiled like she knew I'd lean in. "Melissa," Barbara continued, "you've worked so hard these past few months. We're proud to gift you a luxury apartment in La Jolla, ocean view, fully furnished." Applause erupted. I didn't move. A small silver key sat in a velvet box, now in Melissa's hands. He was beaming. He kissed Mom on the cheek. He hugged Dad. He didn't look at me. Evelyn leaned in and whispered, "Isn't it wonderful? You always said he needed stability." My throat dried. Last year I'd helped Dad scout properties. I even drafted the contracts. He called it research at the time. I'd spent weekends I couldn't afford, away from cases I needed to finish, compiling listings and walking through units. That apartment was one of them. I reached for my wine glass. It trembled just slightly. No one noticed. Later, after cake, after toasts, after a photo I wasn't included in, Evelyn pulled me aside. We were in the hallway, near the old grandfather clock that always ran 3 minutes slow. "I didn't forget you," she said, reaching into her purse. She handed me a red envelope. Thin, light. "It's just a little something." She smiled. "You don't really need much. You're so smart with money." I opened it when she walked away. 3 $1 bills, crisp, folded neatly. I stood there staring at them, the envelope open like a mouth that couldn't stop swallowing. I could hear Melissa laughing in the kitchen. Someone was saying how generous our parents were. Another person joked that he must have earned it. I walked out to the back deck, needing air that didn't smell like cinnamon or performance. Across the skyline, I could see La Jolla's outline under the stars, dots of light blinking from expensive balconies. One of them was his now. $3, that's what I got. 3. I could have screamed, but instead, I smiled. Not the kind of smile you give to blend in, the kind you give when you finally recognize the game and realize you no longer want to play. Back in my guest room, I sat on the edge of the bed. It was cold, sterile, like a hotel room for someone who overstayed their welcome. The red envelope lay on the nightstand. I looked at it, then at my suitcase, half unzipped from the night before. My phone buzzed, a notification from the family group chat. A photo. All of them huddled together, smiling. I wasn't in it. I had taken the photo. I whispered to myself, that gift wasn't just not for me. It was never even meant to include me. I picked up my phone and set an alarm for 3:45 a.m. Then I reached for my suitcase and began to fold my clothes. Not in anger, not in sadness, in clarity. The clinking of cutlery had stopped. The hum of polite laughter and wine-soaked stories had faded into a hush. One by one, the guests trickled out the front door, their coats draped over their arms, cheeks flushed with wine and warmth that didn't reach me. I stood at the kitchen sink rinsing dishes, though no one asked me to. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was a way to ground myself, hands busy while my head still spun from that dinner. Evelyn passed by me, balancing a tray of dessert plates. "You've always been so helpful," she said with a smile, brushing a loose strand of hair from her forehead. "Just like an assistant should be." The words landed sharp. Not malicious. Worse. Casual. I paused mid-scrub. "I'm sorry. What?" She was already out of the room, humming something tuneless. I looked around, half expecting someone else to have heard it, maybe even stepped in with a, "She didn't mean that." But the room was empty, and the silence made it official. That's what I was now. And an assistant. On the island countertop sat a stack of brochures from tonight's event, an afterthought no one seemed to have gathered. Curiosity got the better of me. I wiped my hands on a towel and picked one up. There it was. Family Legacy Presentation, Project Logistics Support, Maureen Sterling, Sterling Assock. Not daughter, not partner. Just logistics support. I read it again, slower this time, letting the insult sink in. Not only was my name buried in the fine print, it had been used without my knowledge. For branding, for optics, for the illusion that the family business was cohesive and inclusive. I let out a quiet laugh, not from amusement, more like disbelief. I hadn't even been told I was part of this thing. They'd slapped my name on a flyer to lend it credibility and then handed the glory to Melissa like it had always belonged to him. Later, I found him near the fireplace, surrounded by a smaller crowd still lingering. I held the brochure in one hand, pointing to the line with my name. "What is this?" I asked. He barely looked up. "Oh, yeah, we added you as logistics. It looked more professional than just sister." "You didn't think I'd need to be asked?" Melissa chuckled, sipping from a whiskey glass. "Maureen, it's just a name on paper. Don't get all lawyer on me." My father strolled over, catching the tail end of the conversation. "It was a smart move," he said, nodding approvingly. "Added some weight to the brand." I didn't say anything else. I just looked at them. Two men who'd used my labor, my expertise, my identity, and reduced it to a tagline on a printed pamphlet. A memory flickered. A year ago, I had helped draft the investment brief that would later be used to close the apartment deal. The numbers, the strategy, the legal structuring, it was all mine. Quietly offered, quietly taken, and now, quietly erased. After excusing myself from the room, I wandered down the hall, not really sure where I was going until I stopped in front of the photo wall. It had always been there, growing over time like ivy, photos of family vacations, holiday dinners, graduations, birthdays. Proud moments. I scanned the rows, Melissa's high school graduation, his college acceptance, his trip to Europe, him holding Evelyn's hand at some charity gala, baby photos, prom pictures, even candid snaps of him mid-speech at events. My image disappeared somewhere around age 12. One last photo of me in a school play, mouth open in midline, arms raised dramatically. After that, nothing. Like I had evaporated into adulthood. I pulled out my phone. My gallery was full. My JD diploma, first courtroom win, a keynote panel I moderated in DC, the first office, with my name on the glass. None of that had made the wall. "Maybe they forgot," I whispered, but even I didn't believe it. The truth was simpler. They showcased what they were proud of, and I wasn't on display. Later, in the stillness of the guest room, I sat on the edge of the bed. I opened the red envelope again and stared at the 3 $1 bills folded with such neat precision. $3, the literal price of being the smart one. I picked up my phone to type a message to Evelyn, something calm, something sharp, something that would sting in just the right way. But halfway through, I deleted it. What was the point? I looked at the alarm app instead. My finger hovered, then tapped 3:45 a.m. Set. The suitcase still sat open in the corner, half packed from when I arrived. I walked over and began folding clothes, carefully, deliberately. I didn't rush. There was no need to. This wasn't about escape. This was about extraction. From a story I had outgrown. From a stage I never agreed to stand on. And as I zipped the suitcase shut, I glanced once more at the wall in the hallway. They didn't need to say it. I saw it on the wall. The guest room ceiling had a small crack right above the bed, spidering out like an old scar. I'd stared at it for nearly an hour, unmoving. The house was asleep, thick with the quiet that only comes after too much wine and too little honesty. My body remembered this mattress, the sag in the middle, the way the sheets smelled faintly of lavender and dust. But everything else in me felt foreign here, like I'd returned to a place that had already redrawn its borders. I scrolled through my phone, past the group photo I wasn't in, past the family chat where no one addressed me directly. Texts from Evelyn were short, perfunctory. Bring wine. Can you look at Dad's taxes? Call when you land. None of them ever said my name. None of them asked how I was, and yet here I was, rinsing dishes and receiving red envelopes like I'd earned a role as their unpaid intern. My hand drifted to the nightstand drawer. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Old receipts, maybe. A charger. Instead, I found a manila folder, thin, but labeled in my handwriting. 2021, Trust Drafting Notes. I opened it slowly. Inside were printed documents I remembered pulling together. Property evaluation spreadsheets, projected tax benefits, clause language I had double-checked. It was all so familiar. One page caught my eye. It was a section titled Contingency Beneficiaries. I scanned the list. My father's name, my mother's, Melissa's, but not mine, not even as a backup. I stared at the omission for longer than I'd admit. I wasn't overlooked. I was omitted. My mind flung backward. I was 29 when I made partner. I'd flown home that December thinking there might be champagne, or at least a toast. Instead, Evelyn had glanced up from her crossword and said, "Well, of course you did. You always win." Barbara had handed me a folder of financial documents. "Review these before Monday, will you? You're good with numbers." I'd laughed then, brushed it off. I didn't know I was building a portfolio they'd one day give to my brother. Back in the kitchen now, I stood near the sink, the same spot I'd helped scrub dishes hours ago. A small draft from the back door chilled my arms. Being capable became a curse, I whispered. It wasn't bitterness, it was clarity, a weight falling into place. They used my competence as an excuse not to care. My achievements became their loophole to avoid showing up for me. They didn't praise me, not because they forgot, but because they believed I didn't need it. I returned to the office, a place I'd once helped organize, now a trophy room for someone else's future. I pulled open the drawer to the right of the desk, knowing exactly what I'd find. The portfolio. A thick binder, leather-bound, embossed with the family trust's name. I flipped through each page, property after property, homes, vacation rentals, undeveloped land parcels, commercial holdings, all under Melissa's name or the trust. Even the condo in La Jolla, the one I had identified, toured, and compiled due diligence on, was listed under a managed entity signed by Barbara and overseen by Melissa. My name wasn't anywhere, not on the assets, not on the trust, not in the appendices. I wasn't just excluded, I'd been edited out. I closed the binder slowly and sat at the desk, exhaling through my teeth. A quote my father once said at a dinner party came back to me, as if whispered from the walls. Men inherit. Daughters marry into legacies. At the time, everyone laughed. I had smiled too, because that's what you do when you want to belong. Now, I let the memory sting. Back in my room, I opened my laptop and began typing. Things I've given to this family. I listed everything: time, legal labor, financial advice, gift money, silence, forgiveness, attendance, trust. Things I've received in return. $3. A thankless title. A guest room. I paused. My fingers hovered above the keys. It's not that they forgot me. They chose not to include me. I deleted the entire document. There was no need to catalog proof for people who didn't care whether I existed on paper. I stood and opened my suitcase again. This time, the motion felt final, not angry, not impulsive, just resolved. I folded each item with a calm I hadn't felt in days. The zipper slid closed like punctuation. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the house breathe around me. Down the hall, a door creaked. Somewhere, a pipe whined, but no footsteps came near. No voice called my name. And why would they? I wasn't erased. I was never intended to exist on their page. The smell of bacon drifted into the guest room before the sound of plates or footsteps. My eyes had been open for hours, but I hadn't moved. I was waiting for something. Maybe clarity, maybe a reason to stay just a little longer. But nothing came, except the dull ache of recognition. I'd lived this day before in different clothes, different years. Only this time, I was finally paying attention. I walked into the kitchen, where Evelyn stood at the stove humming to herself. The table was half set, 2 pitchers of mimosa mix already sweating in the morning sun filtering through the blinds. She greeted me with a quick glance, her voice breezy. "Could you slice the strawberries, hun?" I nodded. "Sure." Barbara stood at the counter, flipping through his tablet like it was Sunday morning, and nothing monumental had just happened. As if gifting Melissa a condo in front of 24 people was standard weekend procedure. "So," I started casually, "that apartment announcement. Surprise, huh?" Barbara didn't look up. "We wanted to keep it special." "You mean quiet?" I asked. He paused. "Maureen, this isn't the time." "Right. Brunch before boundaries." Evelyn chimed in. "You'll understand when you have kids of your own. It's never equal, but it's always love." Melissa strolled in, hair wet from the shower, wearing one of the sweatshirts I'd given him years ago. No acknowledgement. He poured himself coffee like he owned the kitchen too. "Big day, huh?" he said to no one in particular. I wanted to scream, but instead, I reached for the strawberries and started slicing. Later, Barbara handed me a folder. "Can you go through these before the guests arrive? Just legal stuff. Form 8821S, some POA docs, you know the drill." I opened it without thinking. Habit, efficiency. I was already thumbing through signature pages when my eyes caught something that stopped me cold. My signature. From 3 months ago. I remembered the day. He'd said he needed help cleaning up his audit trail, that it was just routine. But here it was, clear as ink, a signed transfer of financial authority tied to the property now under Melissa's name. My name was listed as the former trustee. They hadn't just handed Melissa the apartment, they'd done it using my consent, and I had signed it away. No one forged it. No one tricked me. They simply trusted I wouldn't read it. I stared at the page for what felt like a full minute. Evelyn walked by, adjusting the vase on the table. "All good?" she asked sweetly. "Sure," I replied, "just brushing up on the paperwork I didn't know I gave you." She didn't react. She never did. Around 11, a family friend named Nancy arrived early, hugging Evelyn with practiced grace. She looked over at me and smiled politely. "Oh, is this the woman who helps you with the trust stuff?" Nancy asked the housekeeper. The housekeeper, busy folding napkins, nodded. "Yes, she handles their legal affairs. Very sharp." I blinked. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't even a name. I was a function. I said nothing, just stood still, watching the reflection of the toaster across the counter. It caught my face at a strange angle, like I didn't belong to it. I walked away, slowly, clutching the folder. In the study, Barbara was rearranging printed place cards. I placed the signed document in front of him. He glanced up. "What's this?" "The next time you want me to help you sign myself out of your life," I said, voice low and steady, "at least be honest about it." Evelyn stepped into the room just as I spoke. She looked between us, clearly caught off guard. Barbara looked at the paper, then back at me. "It was best for the family. You're not being fair." "Neither were you," I said. "But I'm not asking for fair. I'm asking for truth." Evelyn opened her mouth, then closed it. She reached for a coaster instead. I picked up the folder again and tucked it under my arm. "You made choices," I said, "so now I'll make mine." I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I just walked out. Because I wasn't angry. I was simply done pretending I still had a seat at their table. After brunch, the house exhaled into an eerie quiet. The clatter of plates, the hum of polite gossip, all gone. Evelyn had gone upstairs to change into her comfortable hosting outfit. and Barbara was flipping channels on mute like the television might drown out what none of us wanted to say. I walked into the living room with a cup of tea I didn't plan to drink. My eyes scanned the space, not just seeing it, but finally registering the details. The throw pillows, the velvet accent chairs, the exact ceramic vases I had used to stage that luxury listing in Del Mar 3 years ago. I hadn't donated them. I hadn't even discussed them. They'd just appeared here. The rug, the side table, even the way the books were arranged by color. All mine. All borrowed without acknowledgement. I ran a finger across the glass coffee table I once placed in a penthouse suite. They didn't borrow what I built, I muttered. They assumed it was theirs to begin with. Barbara wandered in, holding a folder. When you get a moment, can you sort these for me? Evelyn wants the brunch guests to have the updated trust summaries. I took the folder without speaking and sat on the sofa I recognized as the one I selected for a different life, in a different room, where I used to feel capable instead of commodified. The folder opened with a satisfying click. 3rd page in, I stopped breathing. There was my signature, dated 4 months ago. It looked casual, rushed, as if I'd signed it between meetings. I remembered now. Melissa had called, needing a quick look over some documents. Just cleanup stuff, he'd said. Prepping for the next quarter. You know this better than anyone. He wasn't wrong, but he also hadn't mentioned the NDA language buried in the middle. Paragraph 6. The undersigned agrees to waive any claims, present or future, related to real property transfers, branding rights, or public representation associated with the Sterling Family Trust. I had signed away my right to contest their use of my work, my name, even the presentation branding. It was surgical, clean, intentional, and legal. I stared at the clause like it might dissolve under my glare. I'll be damned, I said aloud, letting the bitterness coat each word. As if summoned, Evelyn walked in, now in a soft beige sweater and ballet flats. She smiled when she saw me with the papers. Oh, glad you got those. Melissa said you'd breeze right through them. Did he mention that I already did? I asked, holding up the page. She squinted. What do you mean? This signature, I tapped it, is mine. And this clause. It means I can't sue you for using my work in the presentation, or in the house, or anywhere. Evelyn blinked, then waved it off. Oh, sweetheart, it's just family business. You help, we all grow. That's how legacy works. No, I said, folding the page in half neatly. That's how theft works when it's disguised as loyalty. She bristled. Are you really going to make a fuss over a few decorative pieces? I stood, slowly. I'm going to make a fuss over the assumption that I don't matter unless I'm useful. I walked into the dining room where Barbara was sipping wine with the afternoon sun glowing behind him. I laid the folded document gently on the table. He looked up, unbothered. Something wrong? This is the last time I sign anything for you without reading every word, I said. And the last time you use my work like I'm not even part of this family. Barbara frowned but didn't reach for the paper. It was a misunderstanding. You're being dramatic. Evelyn joined him, arms crossed. We just wanted everything to go smoothly. You're so capable, Maureen. You've always helped us. You mean you've always taken from me, I said, and never once asked if I had anything left to give. I turned and took a step toward the hall, then stopped. I looked at both of them, still seated, still refusing to stand, to face me. You built this house on the assumption I'd never walk away, I said, and maybe that was true once. I walked out without waiting for a response, not because I wanted to avoid confrontation, but because I had just drawn the line, and this time I was standing behind it. The notification buzzed against the nightstand, screen lighting up in the dim guest room like a quiet alarm. I ignored it at first, too tired to deal with more electronic nonsense after the confrontation with my parents. But it buzzed again, persistent. I rolled over and glanced at the screen. Payment processed, $42,000 transfer complete. My breath caught. I blinked, rereading it. 42,000? I hadn't spent that much on anything, let alone recently. I sat up, heart thudding against my ribcage. This account was dormant. I only used it for investment projects tied to the family. It wasn't connected to anything active. I opened the banking app, hands trembling just enough to slow my typing. There it was, clear as crystal. The account had been used to pay off a loan I didn't authorize. I scrolled through the details, noting the recipient's name, the institution, the date of the disbursement. It didn't make sense, until it did. I opened my laptop, dragging it onto the bed, breath now shallow, eyes scanning faster than my thoughts could keep up. I pulled up the shared project files I'd kept copies of. In a folder marked Holdings Legacy, I found a spreadsheet Melissa had once asked me to review, and there it was, a line item. Bridge loan, Maureen Sterling, paid. It was tied to the La Jolla condo, the one they handed him in front of everyone, the apartment I helped research, the one I got nothing for but a Chardonnay hangover and $3. I'd been used to fast-track the purchase. They needed a name with financial weight. Mine. My pristine credit, my dormant equity account, my silent cooperation. And they never said a word. I leaned back against the headboard, bile rising in my throat. A memory clicked into place. 6 months ago, Barbara had called while I was wrapping up a deposition. "Hey, sweetheart," he'd said, breezy as ever. "Need a quick favor? Can I use your old investment account to hold a bit of capital? Just for a week. No risk. I'll handle the paperwork." I hadn't even asked for clarification. I trusted him. That was the mistake. I pulled up the email trail, found the signed PDF, opened it. There it was, buried on page 5, authorization for temporary financial bridge use. I hadn't read it thoroughly. I'd signed on autopilot, believing in the illusion of family honesty. Staring at the screen, my jaw clenched. I wasn't just cut out of the deal. I was the damn deal. The next morning I called the bank. I didn't stutter. I didn't hesitate. "Maureen Sterling," I told the rep. "I need to confirm a recent transaction from one of my accounts." She verified my identity and then pulled up the file. Yes, the funds were transferred to the escrow company managing the condo purchase. My voice stayed calm. "Can you send me the access form? The one used to initiate the transfer?" "Of course. It's a scanned PDF." "Sir, it came from your parents' office fax." I exhaled slowly. "Send it to this email. Thank you." The file arrived within minutes. I recognized the layout, the font, my own signature. It had been folded into the same stack of family updates Barbara once handed me to sign without explanation. The document granted permission to use my name, my accounts, and my liability coverage, all under the Sterling Family Trust. Except the trust wasn't mine. It was theirs, Melissa's. They hadn't just excluded me from the legacy, they'd leveraged me to fund it. I printed the whole thing, 13 pages, stapled, clipped, legal weight, evidence. Then I changed into a clean blouse and walked into the dining room, where Melissa was laughing with Aunt Grace about accent colors and tile samples. "You're going to love the backsplash," he said. "Imported, white Moroccan, subtle but upscale." I walked right up to him and laid the papers in front of his plate. "You're welcome," I said evenly. "Hope the couch is worth it." The room froze. Melissa blinked, then tilted his head. "What's this?" Barbara looked over, expression tightening. Evelyn furrowed her brow. "I said read," I repeated. "Then look me in the eye again." No one moved. Melissa reached for the first page. "I don't— Maureen, what is this about?" "I paid for your down payment," I said, loud enough for the table to hear. "Not with my blessing. With my name." Aunt Grace looked down awkwardly. Someone shifted in their chair. Evelyn whispered, "This isn't the place." I smiled. "Oh, but it is. Because every room in this house was built on borrowed credit. Mine." No one spoke. I picked up the manila envelope, tucked the papers inside, and turned toward the hallway. They didn't chase after me, didn't call my name, because they didn't need to. They'd already spent what they needed. The money wasn't what they stole. It was the silence they expected me to pay with. They waited until after sunset, when the kitchen was cleaned and the house was calm enough to suggest civility. Evelyn called it a quick family regroup. Melissa called it airing things out. I called it exactly what it was, a calculated ambush. I walked into the formal sitting room. The fireplace flickered low, casting soft shadows on their carefully positioned faces. Barbara sat at the head of the room like a judge. Evelyn perched on the edge of the love seat. Melissa lounged, feigning indifference. The air had weight, like everyone was holding back until I gave them a reason to explode. Barbara started, voice even, rehearsed. "Let's talk like adults, Maureen." I didn't sit. He folded his hands. You've been tense lately. We all understand emotions are high, but the way you've chosen to express them, it's becoming difficult. Difficult for who? I asked. For the family, he answered. Strong women, real strong women, know when to keep peace, not start fires. That one sentence, that deliberate placement of the word real. I let it linger in the silence like poison steeping in hot water. So, when I kept quiet for decades, I said slowly, that was strength? He tilted his head. It was grace. No, I corrected. It was survival. Evelyn interjected. Sweetheart, you used to be gentle. You used to bring harmony. You were the kind of daughter any mother would be proud to show off. But not proud enough to credit, I said. Not enough to name on a trust or thank in a speech. Barbara leaned back. Power doesn't suit everyone, Maureen. Some people mistake defiance for strength. And some mistake manipulation for leadership, I snapped. Melissa smirked. Here we go. I turned to him. Don't start. He raised his hands. Just saying, this whole I was wronged narrative is getting old. You don't get to define my story, I said. You're twisting it, Evelyn said. We never wanted to hurt you. You just wanted me quiet, I said. Obedient, presentable. She blinked, but said nothing. Barbara picked up his wine glass and turned toward Melissa. You know, he said casually, when Melissa was young, he never needed to be told twice to behave. Melissa chuckled. Still don't. That was the line. I felt it in my spine. I stood straighter. So I was lovable when I was silent. Got it. The room paused. Tension cracked the corners of their mouths, but no one said a word. I stepped out into the hallway, needing a breath, but instead found Melissa's fiancé waiting near the staircase. Hey, she said, almost apologetically. I nodded. I know this is hard for you, she began. This family's complicated. That's generous, I muttered. She smiled, too soft. Everyone knows you're brilliant. Maybe just let this go? I blinked. Let what go? All of it. The tension, the posts. You've already proved your point. She handed me a plate with a slice of cake on it. Something sweet, just to bring us back together. I stared at the dessert. White frosting, silver pearls, pristine. The image of perfection. They want me to calm down, I thought. Not because they care, but because I'm making them uncomfortable. I handed the cake back. Sweet doesn't suit me anymore, I said. She flinched, then smiled tightly and disappeared back into the sitting room. I followed. The conversation had shifted to lighter things, travel plans, charity auctions. Evelyn was describing Melissa's recent partnership with a luxury brand, voice full of pride. I stepped in and placed the untouched cake on the fireplace mantel. Let me save you all some time, I said, cutting through the chatter. You've already chosen the version of me that fits this house. The quiet one, the helpful one, the invisible one. Barbara sighed. Maureen. No, I said. You've decided. I'm simply accepting it. Melissa crossed his arms. You're making this bigger than it is. I'm making it accurate, I corrected. Evelyn reached for civility. Let's not end this on a sour note. I tilted my head. Then don't rewrite me. I walked to the center table and laid down a folder. On the front, in bold black marker, what you overlooked. No one moved. No one reached for it. They wanted peace, I said quietly, mostly to myself. What they got was documentation. The invitation came that morning, slipped under my door like a ceasefire disguised as celebration. Evelyn's handwriting was unmistakable, ornate, overly cursive, too elegant to trust. Join us for a family presentation tonight, it read. We want to honor Melissa's next chapter. I stared at the card longer than I should have. I knew what it meant, another performance. A curated evening built to restore the family brand after the quiet fractures I'd caused. But I didn't rip it up. I didn't decline. I showed up. The living room had been rearranged. Again. Chairs in neat rows, string lights laced across the mantel. A projector pointed at the wall above the fireplace. The scent of citrus candles and fresh florals filled the air, masking the usual stale discomfort. Guests began arriving. Uncles, aunts, neighbors who only remembered me as the serious one. Evelyn moved through the crowd with a wine glass and air kisses. Barbara stood near the projector, adjusting cables. Melissa leaned back in a leather armchair, legs crossed, sipping from a whiskey glass like a man about to receive an award he didn't earn. "Maureen," Evelyn called with forced warmth. "So glad you came." "Was there ever a choice?" I asked, and she chose not to answer. The lights dimmed. A soft instrumental version of "What a Wonderful World" started to play. Evelyn stepped forward. "Thank you all for being here. Tonight is about legacy, about passing the torch to a new generation, about celebrating not only accomplishments, but the values that built this family." I watched her carefully. Her words were polished, rehearsed, but every syllable was a layer of lacquer over something rotten. The slideshow began. Photos of Melissa, at school, at work, shaking hands with partners I'd once introduced him to. Quotes flashed across the screen. "Leadership is legacy. Family is the foundation of success." His name was everywhere. Mine wasn't even in the subtitles. Then came the slide labeled Project Contributors. I sat forward slightly. Melissa, Barbara, 2 family friends, Evelyn, no Maureen. Even the legal document, the housing file I had once vetted, was labeled Reviewed and Approved by M. Sterling, Melissa. I didn't react, not visibly, but I raised my hand. Was my name just too long for the font? The room stiffened. Some guests chuckled nervously, unsure if I was joking. Barbara coughed. It was just easier for the layout. I stood. From my bag, I pulled a printed presentation draft, one that Shannon had sent me days ago. I handed it to Aunt Lorraine, seated in the second row. "See the red line deletions?" I said. That was me. And this? I walked to the coffee table and picked up a USB. "This is the original." Without waiting for approval, I plugged it into the projector. The screen flickered, then shifted. Now they saw it. My name under every strategy slide, my notes in the margins, my initials beside each legal approval. Barbara stood, trying to disconnect the cable. I beat him to it. "Sit," I said. "You wanted a presentation. This is it." The guests murmured. Evelyn's smile trembled. Melissa stood. "This is unnecessary." "No," I said. "This is overdue." Aunt Lorraine whispered to her husband, eyes darting across the room. Evelyn stepped forward. "It's just paperwork, Maureen." I turned to her. "So is a birth certificate. Should I check if I'm still listed on that too?" Gasps. A sharp inhale from someone near the back. Melissa tried to speak again, but I wasn't finished. "You didn't just erase me," I said. "You rebuilt this entire image on top of my silence." Shannon had seen it first. Her text echoed in my head. "They replaced you. Want me to send it?" She had. I'd saved it. I'd prepared. I pointed to the screen. "That was my work. You don't get to rename it and pretend I was never in the room." Barbara's jaw tightened. "Please stop humiliating the family." I laughed, short and clean. "This isn't humiliation. This is restoration." Melissa stepped toward the projector, arm outstretched for the remote. I grabbed it first. "You all wanted a legacy so badly," I said. "You edited out the only person who actually built it." Evelyn whispered, "You're angry. We can talk." "No, you can listen." The room went quiet. I walked to the center table, pulled a folder from my bag and laid it down. Its title, What You Overlooked. No one moved. "This was a celebration, right?" I said. Barbara stared at me, eyes sharp. "You've made your point." I smiled. "I'm just getting started." I walked out. And for the first time, they listened. Not because I was loud, but because I brought receipts. The house looked like a stage after the actors had gone, streamers limp, wine glasses half full, the ghost of applause still clinging to the corners of the room. I didn't change out of the dress I wore for their little spectacle. Something about keeping it on felt fitting, like refusing to scrub off the residue of what they tried to erase. I sat alone at the kitchen counter, the only light coming from the stove hood above. My phone screen glowed in my hand as I scrolled through posts. There it was, my cousin Ellie's caption, "Family Legacy Night." The photo? All smiles, Melissa center stage, Evelyn and Barbara flanking him like proud investors unveiling a new tech product. My face, conveniently absent. I'd been there, just not in the frame. Beneath it, someone had commented, "Wasn't this Maureen's project originally?" 10 minutes later, the comment disappeared. The post had been edited. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then whispered to no one, "Truth doesn't disappear. It just gets deleted for optics." My mind wandered to high school, to the family Christmas card the year I had acne. They'd cropped me out for aesthetic balance. They said it was a layout issue. I believed them then. I didn't now. I pulled up the photo again, took a screenshot, then uploaded it to my own account. Same caption, but beneath it I added, "Here's the version with the edits undone, just a piece of what's real." Then I posted the deleted comment too, with a side-by-side of the original project file and the manipulated one. No rage, no emojis, just facts. The reaction was slower than I expected, but steady. Messages started trickling in, distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, old friends who had heard whispers but never asked. "I always wondered why your name wasn't there. This explains a lot. I'm sorry. You deserved better." And then Evelyn called. "Maureen," she said, not unkindly, "what are you doing?" "Correcting the record," I replied. "This isn't how family works." "You mean family doesn't work if it's honest?" "You're embarrassing your own blood." I stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "You embarrassed yourselves. I'm just rebalancing the edited version of history." She hung up. 15 minutes later, Barbara called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail instead. "This is not the way to resolve anything. You've made your point. Take it down. People are talking." Melissa texted, "Dad is furious. Mom's crying. Are you really this bitter?" I stepped out to the backyard, screen glowing against the darkness. I stared at their messages like one might stare at the ocean, vast, loud, and suddenly irrelevant. I typed back one line. "I'm not bitter. I'm finally documented." Then I silenced the thread. The pool water reflected the moon in a soft shimmer. I sat on the patio lounge chair, legs curled under me, phone in hand, but not scrolling anymore, just thinking. A memory surfaced, my first internship. My mentor Ellen once told me, "When the truth makes others uncomfortable, you're either about to evolve or be exiled." I hadn't understood it then. Now it landed like a prophecy fulfilled. I opened my voicemail app, scrolled. Dozens of saved messages from Evelyn and Barbara, birthday calls, guilt trips, financial requests, voice memos that started with, "Just checking in," and ended with, "Can you send the documents by Friday?" I deleted them. One by one. My phone buzzed again. A new message, this time from Aunt Ruth. "Just remember, family is forever." I typed a reply before I could think too long about it. "Only if they treat you like you belong in it." Then I stood up, went inside, and grabbed my suitcase. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I packed, not just clothes, documents, laptop, charger, wallet. It was the kind of packing you do when you know there's nothing left to salvage, only what you choose to carry forward. As I zipped the bag shut, the weight of the evening pressed down, not like a burden, but a signal. It was time. Let them fear the silence that used to keep me in line. No one met my eyes the next morning. I walked downstairs the same way I always had, step by step, right hand grazing the smooth oak railing. The smell of stale wine lingered from the night before, mixing awkwardly with the artificial vanilla candle Evelyn had lit to neutralize the air. Nothing about this place felt neutral anymore. Barbara sat at the breakfast bar, newspaper in hand, coffee steaming beside him. He didn't look up. Evelyn stood by the sink, washing a plate that wasn't dirty. Melissa was nowhere in sight. I poured myself coffee, slowly. I didn't speak. Neither did they, but the air was full. Whispers floated behind shut doors. "She's not done. What's she planning next? We have to get ahead of this." They were scared, not of me, of the documentation I now carried like a second skin. Evelyn cleared her throat. "Will you delete the post?" I took a slow sip. "Why would I?" She blinked, stunned by the directness. Barbara pretended to read, flipping a page that made no sound. I left my mug on the counter and walked back to the guest room. That same afternoon, Shannon texted a link. "You're in the headlines." I clicked. The woman behind a family empire's quiet collapse. My picture wasn't used, but the quotes were mine. My words, my data, my story. The article detailed how Melissa's real estate success had been underwritten, silently, by a sister who was scrubbed from every public mention. It described the years I spent reviewing contracts, facilitating funding, drafting trust language. There were no accusations, just truth, laid bare like a courtroom exhibit. Barbara stormed into the living room 30 minutes later, red-faced, crumpling the newspaper in his fist. "You think this is praise?" he barked. "It's shame." I stood calmly. "No, Dad, it's finally accurate." "You've embarrassed this family." "No," I said, walking over and picking up the shredded paper. "You did. I just gave the evidence a place to live." He shook his head, muttering something about betrayal. I left him there and turned my phone back to silent. A text popped up anyway. "Melissa, you're disgusting. You ruined everything. Are you proud of this circus?" I blocked the number before I finished reading the last sentence. Later that evening, Barbara tried again, his voice tired now, as if he thought shame could double as logic. "Your mother's health is suffering, Maureen. Her blood pressure's through the roof. I hope you're satisfied." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked upstairs, pulled open the file drawer in the office, and retrieved a copy of the wire transfer I made 5 years ago. $38,000 sent from my private savings to bail them out of a foreclosure they'd told no one about. I printed it. I carried it downstairs and placed it beside Evelyn's teacup without a word. She glanced at it, confused. Then she saw the number, the signature, the date. Her hand trembled. I sat across from her and leaned in. "You never said thank you, not once. But now I'm causing harm?" She said nothing. Her mouth opened, closed. I stood. "That's your bill," I said. "Mine was paid long ago." And I left the room. The rest of the evening was a carousel of vibrating phones, voicemails. Some relatives apologized, others asked for copies of the documents. A few defended my parents. Many didn't. I didn't respond with rage. I responded with PDFs, links, timelines, screenshots. No raised voices, only receipts. Truth had no emotion. It just stood its ground. That night, the call came from someone unexpected, a family investor. A man I hadn't spoken to in years. "Maureen," he said, "I think we need to talk." "About what?" "About what's next," he said. "The trust, the optics, the future." I looked out the window. My reflection stared back from the glass. I didn't see a daughter anymore. I saw the person who rebuilt the truth from the inside out. I held the phone to my ear and smiled. "Let's talk legacy then. If I wasn't meant to be their heir, I'll become their reckoning." The house was quiet, eerily so. No footsteps, no muffled conversations behind doors, no clink of dishes. It was the kind of silence you earn after breaking a truth wide open, a stillness that doesn't calm. It confirms. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling I knew too well. My bags were half packed, but my mind was already out the door. I stepped into the hallway barefoot, padding past bedrooms with doors left just barely ajar. The same people who cheered for Melissa 2 nights ago now couldn't bother to look me in the eye. That was fine. I wasn't looking for apologies. I was looking for closure. My phone buzzed. I picked it up, half expecting another angry message from Barbara or Melissa. It was from Stephanie. "You made your point. Maybe stop now. No hi, no how are you. Just a tidy dismissal of years she'd witnessed but never named. Stephanie had seen the red flags. She'd helped me analyze the same trust documents now weaponized against me. And every time I tried to speak up, she told me the same thing. Family's complicated. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I deleted her message and scrolled up through our chat history. Dozens of texts where I asked, "Am I overreacting?" And she answered with some version of, "Maybe just let it go." Not anymore. I put the phone down, made myself a cup of coffee, and stared at the backyard through the kitchen window. This house had always been too quiet when the truth came out. I thought about how many people knew parts of my story, sensed the imbalance, but stayed out of it because staying in was uncomfortable. People loved strong women, but only the kind who smiled through being ignored. They called me bold when I succeeded, but called me bitter when I spoke. They admired my spine until it was pointed at them. I walked back to my room and opened the suitcase. This time, I folded everything carefully, not out of fear, not out of urgency, but because I wanted to leave with nothing tangled. Each shirt, each folder, each document had purpose now. The bank transfer receipts, the copies of the trust revision, the annotated slideshow, all went into a slim folder labeled Retained. I reached into the desk drawer and found what I had hidden there years ago. A small photo of me as a child, maybe 6 or 7, standing in front of this very house with missing teeth and pigtails. I'd tucked it away behind old receipts because I never saw it on the family wall. Not then, not now. I added it to the folder. What I left behind didn't matter anymore. The expensive gifts I'd brought over the years still sat unopened in closets. The awards I mailed home were never framed. My nameplate from college law, still untouched, wrapped in tissue, forgotten in a drawer. Let them keep the shell. I was done filling it. I took one last walk through the house. The kitchen, where Evelyn had taught me to make cornbread, but forgot by the time she taught Melissa's girlfriend instead. The dining room, where Barbara once toasted Melissa's internship as if he'd landed the presidency. The den, where I helped draft my first contract, and they forgot to mention me in the meeting. I paused at the wall, the same one, full of photos, Melissa at every age, Evelyn and Barbara at charity events. Even the dog had a framed shot. But not me. Never me. That wasn't painful anymore. It was evidence. I smiled, turned, and walked back to the dining room. I placed a printed letter on the table. Short, clear, final. You don't have to change, but I don't have to stay. That was it. I grabbed my suitcase, walked down the front steps, and opened the car door. The air outside was crisp, a quiet breeze tugging at the edge of my jacket like it wanted to hurry me along. I didn't resist. I placed the suitcase in the trunk, slid into the driver's seat, adjusted the mirror, and took one last look at the house. The curtains shifted, but no one came out. And for once, I didn't wish they would. I didn't slam the door. I simply walked through it and chose not to look back. Sunlight spilled across my new apartment like a quiet affirmation. The windows were open, the air crisp. I didn't wake to the sound of heels on hardwood or voices muffled behind polite doors. I woke to silence, and for once, it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like mine. The kettle hissed. I poured myself coffee, no sugar, just the way I liked it. My playlist played softly in the background. Ella Fitzgerald, her voice smooth as satin. I scrolled through emails from my new boss, approving a contract draft I sent in last night. A payment notification followed. My first solo case was officially closed, funded, and filed. I didn't smile out of pride. I smiled because no one else's name was on the signature line. A knock came at the door. No one visited unannounced. I waited a beat, then opened it. A box sat on the floor. No label, no note, no return address. I brought it inside, setting it on the dining table. It was wooden, light, familiar. I recognized the grain. I'd picked it myself at a crafts fair years ago. I gave it to Evelyn for Mother's Day. Inside, I'd placed a bracelet she once admired in a store window, along with a card I rewrote 3 times before sealing it. I opened the box. The bracelet was untouched, velvet pristine. The card still sealed, edges yellowed, but uncreased. Beneath them sat a folded sheet of paper. The deed to the La Jolla apartment, now officially listed under Melissa's name. Transferred, finalized, notarized. They hadn't sent it to hurt me. They'd sent it because I no longer needed it. They returned what I stopped reaching for, I said aloud. Not angry, just clear. I lit a candle, opened the card, and held the flame to it until it curled into itself. Black edges curling inward like a ribbon surrendering to heat. I placed the ashes in a dish, watched them cool. Later that afternoon, a news alert lit up my phone. Sterling Real Estate Holdings flagged in IRS review. Internal documents. Inconsistencies in trust allocation. Anonymous tip pending investigation. I didn't open the article. I didn't need to. I already knew how it ended. I opened a new email, typed one line to the journalist who first broke the family peace. Start with the non-disclosure clause. Then I hit send. Not for revenge, for every daughter who was told to be quiet, helpful, digestible. I returned to my home office. On the shelf sat a framed copy of the bank transfer I made to save the family home. Underneath it, I placed a new plaque I had commissioned the day I moved in. Legacy is what you leave behind when they forget your name, but remember your impact. Melissa's wedding was next weekend. I wasn't invited. Barbara had sent an email. Evelyn followed with a voice note full of scripted tremble. I didn't reply. Let them have their speeches, their slideshows, their curated smiles. I had something better. Truth. I adjusted my blazer, dabbed on lipstick, and checked my bag one last time. Contracts, keys, a clean notebook. Before I left, I looked in the mirror, not searching for approval, just checking alignment. Then I turned off the lights, locked the door behind me, and walked out into my day. There was no audience, just me, and that was enough. I didn't get the legacy they built. I became the one they'll never escape.